Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time before ice cubes, fans, or air conditioners. You're stepping into the baked clay streets of ancient Persia, where summer isn't just a season, it's a personality. The sun doesn't rise so much as detonate over the rooftops. The air is bone dry, like someone's been slow roasting the atmosphere for hours. You're wearing several yards of silk because that's how they do things here, even in the heat. But trust me, these Persians know what they're doing. They've built a civilization that doesn't just survive the sun, it lounges through it with a glass of rose water in hand. You'll walk past fragrant gardens and whispering water channels. You'll see children napping peacefully under domed ceilings while the outside world blazes like a clay oven. And somewhere along the way, you'll find out how an ancient empire engineered coolness, both literally and aesthetically. Oh, and just to be real with you, you probably wouldn't survive this without their inventions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through a city that smells faintly of dust, mint, and grilled eggplant. This is Persepolis, or maybe Yazd, or perhaps some unnamed outpost near the mountains. Dates and pomegranates dangle from stalls. A sleepy goat winks at you, completely unbothered by the 42 degrees Celsius inferno. And here's what's strange. You're not sweating. Not much, anyway. The streets are narrow, shaded by overhanging balconies. The breeze snakes through like it knows a secret path. A merchant gestures for you to come closer. He sells linen tunics, figs, and, oddly, blocks of ice packed in straw. It's July. Where on earth did that come from? We'll get there. But first, look at the buildings. They're low, wide, and made from thick mud brick. Cool to the touch. The windows aren't glass, but latticed wood. The doors open into shady courtyards that smell of basil and citrus. Inside, the walls are pale, often decorated with geometric tiles designed to soothe the eye. You can feel the temperature drop 10 degrees the second you step inside. No wires, no machinery, just math and mud. Mainstream historians will tell you this architectural style evolved slowly based on local climate and building materials. Sure, but you're already beginning to suspect it's more deliberate than that. This was a society that measured shadows to find true north. You think they didn't calculate which wall caught the wind just right? A fringe theory you'll hear from local guides, who may or may not also sell overpriced saffron, says Persian builders whispered to the wind itself. They studied its moods. They carved channels into the very bones of their homes to court its favor. Romantic, sure, but stand in one of those homes at high noon and you might start to believe it. At night, the city transforms. You climb to the flat roof with a pillow, a woven mat, and maybe a bowl of cherries. The stars burn like lanterns, and the wind slips across your skin like a sigh. Up here, the silence hums. But don't get too relaxed, you're only beginning to grasp the brilliance of this system. These people didn't cool their world the way we do, by overpowering nature. They listened to it, worked with it, shaped their homes around its rhythms. There's no roaring AC unit, just walls, water, wind, and the occasional palm frond. And yet somehow they turned a sun-scorched landscape into something livable. No, something luxurious. Historians still argue whether Persian architecture truly cooled interiors or simply managed expectations, shifting people's routines and perceptions to make the heat seem gentler. Maybe it's both. Maybe comfort is as much psychological as it is physical. You step inside a domed room where someone's grinding cardamom. A ceramic bowl of yogurt and cucumber soup sits in the shade. You sit down, you lean back. The stone beneath you is cool, almost cold. Outside, the heat presses on, relentless and bright. But here, in the heart of a 2,500-year-old home, you are impossibly comfortable. And it's only going to get cooler from here. You shuffle barefoot across a smooth, sun-warmed courtyard floor, marveling at how the space seems to breathe. Not just metaphorically, actually, the walls seem to pull in air like lungs. You pause and hold your hand up near one of the arched openings, and there it is again, a slow-moving breath of coolness, like the building itself is exhaling. This is no accident. Persian homes were designed to live with you. The materials they're made of, mud brick, lime plaster, baked clay, are selected not just for cost or convenience, but for their ability to absorb and radiate heat on a schedule. During the day, these thick walls drink in the sun. At night, when the temperature dips dramatically, as it often does in the desert, they release the warmth slowly like a thermal sponge. You're in a darbas now, a traditional enclosed courtyard home. In the center is a small pool, maybe even a narrow water channel known as a juai. The sound of trickling water blends with birdsong and the clink of pottery being moved inside. You've just entered a Persian version of air conditioning. No buzzing, no freon, no guilt. The trick is air circulation. Even without the futuristic wind catchers we'll get to later, the layout of homes was enough to keep things remarkably bearable. The courtyard's open to the sky, but the surrounding rooms are shaded and placed according to the path of the sun. It's like someone sat down with a compass, a wind chart, and an unhealthy obsession with shadows and said, "How do I make the desert tolerable?" There's a room called the Hozkhane, essentially the coolest room in the house. Tucked into the north side, often semi-subterranean, it's where you'll find a pool, thick walls, and precious shade all day long. You might doze there after lunch, perhaps lulled by the hypnotic splash of a nearby fountain. It's a sensory lullaby. Water, stone, lavender in the breeze. One fringe historian once quipped that Persian architecture was like a passive-aggressive grandmother. It didn't yell at the heat, it just silently made everything more comfortable until the heat gave up and left. And honestly, not far off. You notice something else. The floor tiles are glazed a faint turquoise. Not just for decoration, glazed tiles reflect sunlight. The color blue psychologically feels cooler. You're walking through intentional serenity, room by room. As you explore, you pass from a baruni, public space, into the anderuni, private quarters, and the air shifts again. It's cooler, quieter, like slipping into another layer of reality. Doors are set not opposite each other, but offset, creating air currents that twist and turn. Windows aren't really windows in the modern sense, more like carved breathing holes. Light filters in at gentle angles. No harsh beams, just a soft ambient glow. There's even a funnel-shaped opening along one hallway, barely noticeable unless you stop and feel the air. It's part of a rudimentary ventilation strategy. Heat rises, exits, and in doing so pulls in cooler air from lower areas. It's not rocket science. It's buoyancy, intuition, and patience. Historians still argue whether these cooling effects were enough to combat Iran's notorious summer heat. Some say yes, it worked brilliantly. Others insist it was mostly symbolic, a small comfort amid unavoidable sweat. But either way, it shows a remarkable effort to live with nature, not against it. You sit beneath a scalloped archway, watching the interplay of light and shadow on the tiles. You run your hand along the wall, rough but cool. There's a jug of sharbat nearby, infused water sweetened with fruit and herbs. You sip. The breeze returns, curious as a cat, slipping through unseen corridors and ruffling your sleeve. And somewhere in that moment, you realize something crucial. This house isn't built despite the desert. It's built with it. The architecture listens to wind, to sun, to silence, and replies with stillness, shade, and a faint whisper of relief. You glance up. A ceiling dome overhead is subtly indented, decorated with a pattern that not only looks nice but directs rising heat away from where people sit. You think back to modern homes, sealed like Tupperware, blasting air-conditioned air into hermetically sealed living rooms. And you wonder, what did we lose in the pursuit of comfort? Because here you are, no hum, no draft, no climate anxiety, just clay, breeze, and the gentle, deliberate intelligence of a civilization that knew how to chill. In every sense of the word. You wander a little farther through the winding lanes of this ancient Persian city, and something strange catches your eye. Rising above the rooftops are tall, slender towers, some square, some octagonal, and all with elegant slits cut into their sides. They look like the turrets of a fortress made by someone very concerned about cross-ventilation. These are bad gears, wind catchers, and they might just be the cleverest ancient invention you've never heard of. You step inside a larger home now, belonging perhaps to a wealthy merchant or a scholar. The moment you enter, the temperature drops, as if you've walked into a secret glacier tucked inside the desert. You look up and realize you're standing directly beneath one of those mysterious towers. The bad gear isn't decorative, it's functional. It works by catching the wind, whatever breeze dares pass over this sun-baked land, and directing it downward into the building below. It does this without electricity, without fans, and without making a sound. Like some sort of dignified air butler, even on days when the wind doesn't blow, the tower still works. Heat rises, right? So, as warm air escapes up through the badger, it creates a subtle vacuum that pulls cooler air in from the lower vents or courtyards. A never-ending loop of passive cooling, powered by physics and good taste. Historians generally agree that wind catchers were an advanced and deliberate innovation in Persian cities like Yazd, where over 300 of them still stand today. But they continue to debate exactly how efficient these structures were. Were they enough to cool an entire household? Or just to offer a pocket of relief here and there? Scholars run simulations. Locals just nod and say it works. You walk up a narrow staircase to see the inside of the tower. It's all smooth plaster, carefully angled vanes and hollow channels. It looks almost organic, like a seashell designed to whisper breezes instead of secrets. You spot a small fountain directly underneath the air shaft, an added flourish in wealthier homes. The wind, cooled by water vapor, drifts down like silk. You close your eyes and imagine this as your bedroom. Instead of humming electronics, you fall asleep to the faint whoosh of ancient engineering. There's a theory, on the fringe naturally, that some badgers were adjusted seasonally. Wood panels or hanging cloths may have helped redirect airflow as needed, like air conditioning knobs, except built out of woven reeds and high-stakes guesswork. Fashion meets fluid dynamics, and of course not all wind catchers are created equal. Some designs feature 4 sides to catch wind from any direction. Others are single-sided like a cat who only cares about one window. The shape of the opening, the height of the tower, even the materials used inside, all of it fine-tuned over centuries by builders who, let's be honest, would probably laugh at modern thermostats. In Yazd, even today, people live in homes cooled by these ancient towers, and while some have upgraded with modern touches, others proudly rely on nothing more than mud, math, and wind. You can almost hear the tower sigh like it's been waiting for you to notice all along. You sit at a low table beneath the badger and sip rosewater tea, cooled by air that's just traveled through 40 vertical feet of stone. Outside, the sun bakes rooftops like flatbread. Inside, your ankles are pleasantly chilled. One local tale says that the most elaborate badgers could even cool underground cisterns, storing not just air but ice, as we'll see later. Another theory? That poets once stood beneath them to compose verses in the breeze. True or not, it fits the mood. The wind shifts slightly and the tower answers. A gentle draft rolls through the room. The curtains stir, the candle flickers, and for a moment you forget what century you're in. You step back out into the sun, briefly, don't worry, and begin to notice something that had escaped your attention until now. The entire feel of the city shifts depending on where you walk. Some alleys feel oppressively hot, others surprisingly tolerable. What gives? You peer down at your sandals as you walk across the dusty path, and then you glance at the nearest wall. Thick. Mud brick. Barely a window in sight. Just behind it, there's a haven of coolness. The trick is in the materials, and the way they've been used. Persian builders weren't messing around. They didn't have fiberglass or insulation foam, but they had something arguably better. Centuries of experimentation with clay, lime, sand, and water. Mud brick, simple and cheap, was their star material. It absorbs heat during the day and releases it when temperatures drop at night. It's like a heat sponge with a PhD in patience. And unlike modern buildings that seem to trap heat like a vengeful toaster oven, these homes were designed to breathe. The walls are thick, sometimes over half a meter, not just for structure, but for thermal regulation. It's the architectural equivalent of drinking hot tea in hot weather. Counterintuitive, but shockingly effective. You step into one of the side homes and the transition is immediate. Outside, it's roughly 110 degrees Fahrenheit, or whatever number makes sweat happen in places you didn't know had sweat glands. Inside, it's fine. Not icy, not chilly, but calmly cool. You don't feel assaulted by the air, you feel invited. There's a courtyard in the middle, shaded by high walls and perhaps even a few trees. Citrus or fig if you're lucky. In the center, a small pool reflects the sky. The surrounding rooms are arranged to maximize cross-ventilation. Each doorway is a silent participant in the great airflow choreography. And let's talk ceilings. Many rooms feature domes or vaults, shapes that aren't just pretty but purposeful. Hot air rises, remember? A domed ceiling collects it upward and away from your head. Some domes even have small ventilation holes, tiny escape hatches for heat. One fringe theory claims these holes also allowed the occasional owl or bat to roost, which, okay, isn't ideal for bedtime, but let's pretend they helped with insect control. Very eco-friendly. The floors are often sunken a few steps below ground level. Why? Because the lower you go, the cooler it gets. You may find a family room half submerged, its walls plastered with smooth lime and decorated with floral patterns. The thick stone keeps everything pleasantly chilly, like nature's own cellar. Historians still argue whether these building methods were purely practical, or if they carried deeper symbolic meanings. Some claim that the use of enclosed courtyards echoed Zoroastrian ideas of order and inward focus, creating private, serene sanctuaries amid the chaos of the outer world. Others say, no, they just wanted a cool place to nap. Honestly, both can be true. You sit for a while on the edge of the pool. It's not for swimming, it's there to chill the air. As the surface evaporates, it lowers the temperature around it. It's all part of an ancient evaporative cooling process we'll explore more deeply soon. For now, just enjoy the way the breeze dances over water and reaches your face a few degrees cooler than before. A servant passes by carrying a tray with melon slices and sour cherry juice. She's barefoot and the tiles make a pleasant tapping sound under her step. Even her outfit, layers of gauzy linen, seems optimized for temperature management. You make a mental note to rethink your whole wardrobe. There's a cat sleeping in the corner, stretched out like royalty. Not a care in the world. That cat understands Persian architecture better than most modern developers. As the afternoon sun begins to lower in the sky, the room remains serene. You hear the distant call to prayer, a soft echo bouncing through the alleys. And again, you find yourself wondering how so many ancient solutions were, well, better. No filters to replace, no ductwork to clean, no monthly utility bills that make you question your life choices. Just mud, water, shade, and silence. And somehow, that was enough. You lie back on a stone bench beneath the domed ceiling. The air is cool, the walls solid and gentle, and the city hums on, alive with the quiet science of surviving heat. One brick, one breeze, one wise design at a time. You follow the sound of trickling water down a narrow alley lined with flowering vines. The air shifts again, subtle but distinct. Cooler, damper. Like stepping into the shade beneath a waterfall, except there's no waterfall in sight. Just dust, sky, and the ever-present hush of ancient engineering. Then you see it, a grated opening in the ground, like a forgotten stairway to nowhere. A small child crouches beside it, tossing in pebbles and listening for the faint splash below. What you're looking at isn't a well, it's part of one of Persia's most incredible and underrated inventions, the Qanat. The Qanat is an underground aqueduct system engineered centuries before Rome even considered indoor plumbing. It brings fresh, cool water from mountain springs across miles of desert without a single pump. Gravity does all the work, silent, patient, eternal. You duck into a nearby home and ask, without speaking, for a peek at the basement. The owner nods, amused. You descend a narrow stairwell into what feels like a cave. The temperature drops sharply. You hear water, gentle and constant, flowing through a stone channel embedded in the floor. This is a kariz, a domestic qanat branch, bringing mountain meltwater directly beneath the home. You sit by the channel and dip your fingers into the stream. It's so cold it almost stings. This water has traveled miles beneath your feet, shielded from the sun by layers of earth. It hasn't seen daylight in days, maybe weeks, and now here it is, cooling not just your skin, but the very walls around you. The genius lies in the method. Qanats begin at a source, usually high in the mountains, then slope ever so gradually downhill, burrowing beneath the desert like a polite mole. Vertical shafts every few dozen meters provide access for maintenance, but also allow heat to vent. The entire system works in silence with no moving parts, no visible footprint, and no drama. It just exists. Historians still debate exactly when and where qanats first appeared. Some say Persia around 1000 BCE. Others point to Mesopotamia or even earlier Neolithic efforts. But Persia no doubt perfected them. Cities like Yazd and Kerman flourish because of them. Imagine an entire civilization engineered around subterranean plumbing. That's not just resourcefulness. That's resilience with style. One fringe theory suggests that Persian engineers used the stars to map the slope of the qanats, aligning celestial movement with hydraulic flow. Is it true? Who knows? But admit it, it's a romantic idea. Constellations guiding cool water beneath your sandals. You return upstairs, and now the architecture makes even more sense. Those slightly damp basement rooms aren't just for storage. They're early air conditioners. As the cool water flows through the lower levels of a home, it chills the surrounding air. That air then rises, gently replacing warmer air above. Some homes even designed wind catchers to direct air downward toward the qanat before channeling it back up. This created a cycle of natural refrigeration that, brace yourself, could even condense dew. Yes, you heard right. Ancient Persians used underground water channels to make the desert air so cool that water literally formed out of the air. It's like something out of science fiction, only it's been happening for over 2,000 years. You step outside again and notice a group of children gathering water from a stone spout fed by a qanat. Their clay jugs are heavy, but they laugh as they carry them home. Nearby, a woman uses the runoff to water her herb garden. Mint, basil, maybe a bit of rue. This isn't just irrigation, it's climate control. And it's not just for the elite. Qanats are democratic, available to entire communities. They don't discriminate between rich and poor, farmer and merchant. If anything, they encourage cooperation, shared responsibility for maintenance, shared benefit from the flow. One scholarly debate persists over how sustainable qanats truly were. Some argue that overuse or mismanagement led to collapses and water scarcity. Others insist they were the pinnacle of sustainable design, working with nature and never trying to dominate it. You find yourself leaning toward the latter. After all, you're standing in a sun-scorched land, cooled by invisible rivers and whispering stone. No wires, no fuel, no planetary guilt. Just cool water, ancient knowledge, and the soothing murmur of a system built to last. As the sun begins to set, you walk slowly through the neighborhood. You pass another qanat opening, barely noticeable unless you knew to look. The breeze rises from it faintly, cool, mineral-scented, like the breath of the mountain itself. You close your eyes. The air, the earth, and the water are working together, and you, sweat-free, sun-dazed, and maybe just a little sleepy, are starting to understand what the Persians knew all along. Comfort doesn't come from overpowering your environment. It comes from knowing how to listen to, you wake, well, almost wake, to the sound of a faint drip, drip, drip. Somewhere nearby, water is evaporating into the air, doing its quiet, ancient work. You're reclining beside a shallow indoor pool again, but this time you've started noticing the subtleties. The scent of wet stone, the slightly cooler temperature near the surface, the gentle way the air moves, not with force, but with grace. This is evaporative cooling, ancient Persian edition. You've probably experienced this without realizing it. Sweat, after all, is your body's way of using evaporation to stay cool. The same principle applies here, but instead of sweat, it's carefully placed pools, damp tiles, and open airflow. You trail your fingers through the water. A breeze, subtle but steady, filters through the wind catcher above. The air brushes across the water, picks up moisture, and cools as it moves. That newly chilled air drifts down into the room, giving your skin that same pleasant tingle as stepping into a shaded patio with a spray mister. Historians generally agree this wasn't accidental. Persian architects understood evaporation deeply, even if they didn't use the word. They knew water, airflow, and shadow could combine to soothe the body and calm the mind. And they weren't afraid to play around with the formula. You walk into another room, likely a haskane again. The pool here is larger, maybe ringed with ceramic tiles in cobalt blue and bright saffron yellow. Above it hangs a damp cloth, almost like a curtain, strung across an opening in the ceiling. Wind catcher air flows over the cloth, picks up moisture, and then circulates downward. It's like a slow-motion swamp cooler made out of linen and prayer. One fringe theory proposes that some haskanes were positioned precisely over qanat channels, not just for water access, but to pull chilled air from the qanat itself, up through the room and out through the wind catcher, creating a reverse airflow that cooled the entire home like a quiet exhale. You step closer to the wall and notice a ceramic jar with a small crack in it. Intentional, it seems. Water seeps out slowly, dampening the surface beneath it. The evaporation cools the nearby stone, and the entire room gets a little bonus chill. Ancient AC via a leaky pot. And of course, these rooms weren't just for comfort. They were social, too. Family members gathered here to rest in the hottest hours of the day. You imagine sleepy conversations, maybe the sound of a lute, or the quiet thud of a backgammon piece being set down. No one moves quickly. Why would they? You're handed a small towel, damp and scented faintly with rose water. You press it to your face and let out a sigh. It's not the rush of refrigerated air, no. It's better. It's the idea of coolness, a whisper instead of a shout. Like nature saying, "Here, rest a while." Historians still argue whether these rooms were as effective as we imagine. Some claim the psychological effect, expecting to feel cooler, played a bigger role than the physics. Others swear by the temperature differentials measured in preserved haskanes. There's even debate about whether these techniques were shared with or borrowed from other ancient cultures. Egyptians, perhaps, or early Mesopotamians. Still, Persia's mastery of the method is undeniable. You linger near the pool. A man walks in with a small jug of vinegar syrup mixed with snow. Yes, snow, harvested from mountains and stored somehow. We'll explain that miracle later, but for now, the contrast is enough to make your teeth ache and your scalp tingle. Another whisper of air rolls in through the wind catcher. It smells of water, citrus, and stone. You start to wonder how this room would feel by candlelight, after the sun has gone down, with the moon filtering in through the badger above. Would the walls sigh with cooling moisture? Would the pool release its final chill into the night air? Would the silence grow heavier, fuller, like sleep itself settling in? A cat pads across the wet stone, paws perfectly silent. You stretch out on a cushion, head resting near the edge of the pool. The ceiling curves above you like the inside of a seashell. The breeze tickles your neck, and somewhere between one breath and the next, you forget what air conditioning ever sounded like. Because here, all it does is whisper. The next morning, just as the sun stretches its golden limbs over the rooftops, you find yourself following a quiet path outside the city. The air is still cool, but not for long. Already the shadows are retreating, the earth warming beneath your feet. You've been promised a sight both bizarre and brilliant. Then, rising out of the dusty horizon, you see it. A giant dome, squat and smooth, made from mud brick and looking like a forgotten spaceship built by someone who really appreciated a minimalist aesthetic. This, you learn, is a yakchal, literally an ice pit. Yes, in the middle of a desert. In ancient Persia, ice. In summer. You squint, expecting to see a mirage, but no, this is very real. You approach the structure. It's about 10 to 15 meters high, with a deep pit beneath it. The surface is smooth and pale, often coated in a special mortar made of sand, clay, egg whites, lime, and goat hair. Because why not? It's a perfect insulator, and it shrugs off the brutal heat like a camel in a snowstorm. You duck into the narrow entrance. Immediately it's cooler. Noticeably. The kind of cool that makes your eyes widen a bit, as though your body is adjusting to the sheer audacity of it all. Inside the dome, the temperature remains astonishingly low, even in July. Here's how it works. During winter nights, when temperatures can plummet in the desert, water is poured into shallow canals just outside the dome. These ice pools freeze overnight. Come morning, workers break the ice and carry it into the yakchal, stacking it carefully, layer by layer, interleaved with straw for insulation and airflow. Once inside, the dome's thick walls and conical shape trap the cold. The sun may blaze outside, but the interior holds its chill, preserving ice for months. Sometimes even through the entire summer. No cords, no humming, no parts to replace. Just geometry, clay, and ancient Persian defiance of thermodynamics. You walk around the edge of the pit, marveling at how simple it all seems, and how impossible. This isn't just a cooler, it's a strategy, a commitment, a plan. One fringe theory claims yakchals were used to make ancient Persian sherbet, sweet frozen drinks flavored with pomegranate or sour cherry. Whether that's true or just a delightful daydream, it certainly adds flavor to your experience. You imagine nobles sipping snow-chilled rosewater in a garden while a servant fans them with a palm leaf. Historians still debate whether yakchals were more common in urban centers or rural outposts. Some argue they were elite tools used only by the wealthy. Others say they were part of communal life, with neighborhoods pooling resources, literally to preserve their summer comforts. You hear about variations. Some yakchals were paired with wind catchers to circulate cold air into nearby buildings. Others had hidden subterranean chambers where perishables, milk, yogurt, fruits, were kept cool long before the invention of the electric fridge. A guide, toothy and cheerful, tells you one yakshal stored enough ice to supply an entire wedding feast, complete with a dessert of frozen sweetened rice, the ancestor of Persian Bastani Sonati. You can't verify it, but the image is charming. Dancers swaying under lanterns, guests lifting chilled bowls to their lips, and laughter drifting on the warm night breeze. You walk back outside and circle the structure slowly. From above, it looks like a beehive. From the side, a half-buried planet. And from the inside, it feels like someone whispered snow into the earth and asked it to remember. The sun's higher now, the temperature rising. But inside the yakchal, winter still clings to the air like a secret. And you begin to wonder, what else did they preserve in there? Fruit? Milk? Love letters? Ice-sculpted poetry? Or maybe just one simple idea. We don't have to suffer the heat. We can meet it with grace, with patience, and a little ice. As the sun climbs lazily into its midday throne, you start to notice a peculiar exodus happening across the rooftops. Doors open, ladders creak, cushions are carried upward, and suddenly, entire families begin to appear on their flat, sun-baked rooftops. Not to labor, not to shout across the neighborhood, but to sleep. Yes, sleep. Up here, on purpose. Welcome to one of ancient Persia's most charming customs, rooftop sleeping. You clamber up a narrow stairwell behind an old home and emerge onto a rooftop terrace that feels like a scene from a dream. Woven mats have been unrolled. Ceramic pitchers glisten with condensation. Thin cotton sheets flutter like lazy flags in the breeze. There are no fences, no barriers, just open rooftops, one after another like floating platforms of peace. The roof is cool, not cold, but cooler than the world below. That's the secret. After sundown, the desert cools rapidly. While the thick mud brick homes slowly release the heat they absorbed during the day, the rooftops are the first to feel the night air's relief. You settle into a woven mat, the texture rough beneath your fingertips. The stars are just starting to reveal themselves. No neon signs, no streetlights, just the hush of sleeping families and the occasional bark of a faraway dog. You hear someone playing a sitar, its notes falling like soft pebbles into the silence. There's a cultural rhythm to this ritual. The rooftop isn't just cooler, it's social. Grandparents tell stories, children count stars, parents stretch out under the sky, fanning themselves with palm leaves and sipping cold yogurt drinks. It's a ritual of resilience, a soft rebellion against the heat. Historians often write about this with fond nostalgia, noting how rooftop sleeping remained common even into the early 20th century in Iranian towns like Yazd, Shiraz, and Kashan. Some still do it today. But there are debates too. Was it hygienic? Was it safe? Was it really as peaceful as the romantic versions suggest? Or were people just making the best of poor insulation and limited space? One fringe historian even posits that sleeping on rooftops wasn't just for comfort. It was also an early form of communal weather monitoring. Elders would track the night's humidity, dew, and breeze patterns, predicting the next day's heat with shocking accuracy. In other words, Grandpa was the weatherman. You pull a thin cotton blanket over your feet and gaze upward. The stars don't twinkle so much as shimmer like heat waves frozen in place. Somewhere nearby, a goat sneezes. Somewhere else, someone is snoring like a slow drumbeat. Your neighbor's family on the next roof over is just a few feet away. You wave and they wave back. Rooftop sleeping isn't private, but it is peaceful. It's the soft intimacy of a shared experience where the whole neighborhood dreams under one sky. The air up here is lighter, not just in temperature, but in mood. It smells faintly of baked earth, jasmine, and whatever someone just pulled from a tandoor oven a few blocks away. If you're lucky, someone might offer you a bite. Warm bread, maybe, or sweet melon, sliced in the dark. You lie back, hands behind your head. The roof holds your weight like a friend's shoulder. The breeze brushes over your face, and you wonder why this ever went out of fashion. You try to remember the last time you truly felt air. Not processed, filtered, mechanically chilled air, but honest, skyborne air, shaped by no one but wind and time. And just as your eyelids start to flutter, you hear the faintest giggle from a child next door. Then the low murmur of lullabies, ancient songs sung in languages you don't speak but somehow still understand. You're not in a bedroom. You're in the cradle of a civilization that made peace with the heat, not by running from it, but by sleeping under the same stars that watched over their ancestors. One scholar once called rooftop sleeping architecture's softest feature. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just what happens when comfort meets simplicity, and they decide to lie down for a while. You close your eyes. The city breathes beneath you. You wake slowly, not to an alarm clock, but to the scent of something sweet and spicy drifting up from a nearby rooftop. Someone's brewing tea. The breeze carries it straight to your senses. Steam, cardamom, a hint of saffron. And just like that, you're fully awake, if not entirely ready to leave this rooftop dreamscape. But there's more to explore. You follow the smell, descending carefully until you enter a shaded room where someone has just wafted incense through the air. It hits you like a warm hug. Rose petals, a bit of cedar, and something else you can't quite name. Something rich, resinous, ancient. And that's when it hits you. The Persians didn't just cool the air, they perfumed it. Yes, they scented their breezes. Because of course they did. In ancient Persia, the concept of comfort extended beyond temperature. Smell mattered deeply. Homes were often adorned with aromatic herbs, essential oils, and bundles of dried flowers that hung like sleepy chandeliers. Rooms weren't just cooled, they were curated, and the air that moved through a home was expected to smell, well, pleasant. You pass a row of small ceramic bowls set near a window, each filled with rose water, mint, or citrus peel. As wind passed over them, it lifted the scent into the room. It's basically the 5th century version of a scented candle, minus the wax and the fire hazard. One corner holds a mashk, a water skin that gently seeps cool water onto porous clay walls. Not only does this assist with evaporation, it also freshens the air with a faint mineral scent, like rain on stone. Someone has tucked crushed bay leaves and myrtle around the opening. It's air conditioning with aromatherapy built in. Historians note that ancient Persian texts often mention air made sweet in descriptions of ideal homes. Gardens weren't just for shade or beauty. They were functional scent factories. Orange blossoms, jasmine, basil, even narcissus, which bloomed like stars at night and gave the breeze a romantic, drowsy finish. Some fringe theories suggest that certain families experimented with burning scented woods near wind catcher intakes, allowing perfumed smoke to be carried gently through the entire home. Sounds a bit intense, sure, but the ancient elite did love a good dramatic flourish. You find yourself wandering into a divan room, pillowed, tiled, and softly lit. A guest is arriving, and the host has just sprinkled rose water on the floor. Not a scrub, not a mop, just a light spritz, enough to release its scent when the breeze skims across it. Later, after tea, someone will pour a bit of that same water over their wrists. Not to cleanse, but to refresh. Even everyday items carried the touch of fragrance. Fans woven from palm leaves were sometimes dipped in herb-scented water. Pillow stuffing included dried lavender. Clothing was aired near beds of chamomile. Imagine sweating in 100-degree heat, only to dry off with a towel that smells like a garden nap. That's not hygiene, it's hospitality. Scholars still debate how much of this was practical and how much was performative. Was it about masking odors in densely packed cities, a class signal, or just an organic part of Persian aesthetics, where everything, architecture, language, even air, had to be beautiful? The answer might be all three. You rest for a moment beneath a carved lattice window. Outside, the scent of fresh-baked flatbread mingles with sweet smoke from someone burning esfand. Wild rue seeds cracked open in a ritual of protection. The smell is sharp, grounding, like ancient incense with a mission. The breeze stirs again. Not cold, not fast, just cool enough. And with it comes the faintest aroma of pomegranates. Somewhere, someone is slicing them open. Somewhere, the juice is hitting the air, fragrant and tart. And in that moment, you're not just experiencing ancient air conditioning. You're breathing it, living in it, letting it tell stories through your nose. You lean back, eyes half-lidded, and wonder how on earth we ever thought Freon and filters could compete with basil, breeze, and a bowl of rose water. You wander through a set of tall, arched doorways, passing from the scented calm of the home into something even more enchanting. A hush falls over the space. Not silence exactly, but a softened symphony. The distant splash of water, the rustle of leaves, the soft crunch of gravel under your sandals. You've just stepped into a chahar bag, a traditional Persian garden. It's not a garden in the Western sense. There are no gnomes, no picket fences, no obsessively trimmed hedges. What you're standing in is a centuries-old cooling strategy disguised as paradise. The layout is always the same. A central axis with 4 quadrants, hence chahar meaning 4. Water channels, called rills, flow between them, shimmering under sunlight, guiding your eye and your feet through the space. Fruit trees arch overhead, heavy with figs, quince, or sour orange. Tall cypresses form natural corridors of shade, dark and quiet, like leafy libraries. You step onto a stone path and instantly the temperature drops. The canopy above filters light into something dappled and kind. A breeze slips through and picks up moisture from the water channels, cooling the air by a few more precious degrees. You hear the sound of doves or maybe a pigeon too lazy to fly. Gardens like this weren't just for noble families or kings, though yes, the royals certainly had the fanciest ones. They were found in caravanserais, wealthy homes, and even public areas in desert cities. Historians still debate whether the layout had religious symbolism. 4 rivers of paradise, anyone? Or if it was simply the most efficient way to organize irrigation. Either way, the effect is undeniable. You pause at the edge of a large rectangular pool, its surface calm and reflective. This is a house, and it's not for swimming. It's a mirror. A mirror for the sky, for the architecture, for the soul. People gathered around it for poetry readings, picnics, afternoon naps. The water, warmed by the day, releases its coolness slowly as the evening falls. One fringe account claims that some poets would walk barefoot through the rills to stimulate thought. Another suggests that children played in the shallow channels while elders debated astronomy over pomegranate wine. Neither is confirmed. Both are wonderful. The air here is thick with scent, rose, mint, maybe a whisper of honeysuckle. And yet, nothing feels overwhelming. It's all carefully balanced, a harmony of elements. Water to reflect, trees to shade, flowers to soothe, stone to anchor, and at the center of it all, stillness. You find a carved bench beneath a mulberry tree and sit. You feel the shade press down, not in a heavy way, but like a blanket someone's tucked gently over your shoulders. A gardener passes slowly with a copper watering can, feeding the roots of something green and determined. Every few minutes, a breeze returns. Always unexpected, always just right. You look up, and the tall walls surrounding the garden frame the sky like a painting. This isn't just landscaping, it's architecture, the kind you live inside of. Historians argue over which Persian ruler first perfected the Shahar Bagh model. Some say Cyrus the Great, others Darius. Some even trace it back to the gardens of Babylon. What's certain is that Persian garden design traveled through India, into Mughal palaces, across the Islamic world, and even into the formal gardens of Europe. But here in its birthplace, it remains deeply local, deeply personal. A servant arrives with a tray of something cold, likely faluda, a frozen dessert made of rice noodles, rosewater, and lime. It's both dessert and air conditioner. You take a spoonful. It melts on your tongue like snow that decided to be poetic. And as the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the water, you realize this garden isn't just for decoration. It's for survival, a way to outwit the heat without lifting a sword. The Persians didn't fight nature, they invited it in, coaxed it, wove it into their lives like silk. And here, surrounded by trees, water, and the faint buzz of bees, you begin to wonder if maybe this is what real air conditioning feels like. A breeze, a branch, and the knowledge that someone once cared deeply enough to shape beauty out of heat. You step back out of the garden, reluctantly, as if leaving a particularly soothing dream. The sun is dipping low now, casting the city in golden amber and cool purples. The streets are quieter. People have slowed their movements, drifting like sleepy shadows toward evening rest. You pass a row of homes, each different, yet each blending seamlessly into the next. The architecture seems to whisper again. Low walls, narrow alleys, wooden doors tucked into archways. And from those doors, step people in clothing that flows like the wind itself. You've entered the realm of ancient Persian fashion, specifically how it kept people cool in a climate that tried very hard to do the opposite. You see a man in a pale linen robe, loose but layered, cinched with a wide cloth belt. Beside him, a woman sways by, wrapped in softly draped fabrics from head to toe, yet somehow moving as if each step was a breeze. You might expect these heavy-looking garments to trap heat, but no, this is strategic elegance. Ancient Persians were masters not only of architecture, but of wearable climate design. First off, they understood the secret weapon of the desert: air. Not just the kind you breathe, but the kind that moves between your clothes and your skin. The trick wasn't tight clothes or fewer layers, it was layers that breathed. Robes, wraps, shawls, all draped to let air flow, carrying away sweat before it had a chance to cling. And the materials? Linen, cotton, and finely spun wool depending on the season, but always light in color: white, cream, pale blue. Nothing absorbs heat like black silk in July. Even soldiers wore tunics designed to catch a bit of breeze beneath the armor. Imagine stepping into battle knowing you won't have to fight your clothing too. Historians have uncovered garments preserved in dry desert tombs that show precise stitching techniques meant to distribute heat away from the body. Some theorists claim tunics were sewn with deliberate vertical channels, not decorative, but aerodynamic. You probably won't find that at your local shopping mall. You wander into a cloth merchant's stall, drawn by the sound of scissors and the smell of freshly dyed fabric. Bolts of material hang like sleepy waterfalls: undyed cotton, deep indigo wool, and saffron-colored silk that catches the last light of the day. A merchant hands you a robe. It's heavier than you expect, but when you try it on, it floats. The layers trap cooler air inside, keeping the heat out. You're a walking mud brick house, basically, and you're not mad about it. One corner of the shop displays turbans, not just a symbol of status or faith, but practical sun shields. A properly wrapped turban protects the head, the neck, and even parts of the face while allowing airflow underneath. And when soaked in water and left to dry on the head, instant evaporative cooling. Persians. 1. Heat. 0. Women's clothing followed similar rules. Flowing veils, light trousers under longer robes, and soft slippers that kept feet from absorbing the street's midday heat. No tight corsets or scratchy layers here. Just ease, motion, and fabrics that knew how to dance. Some fringe historians believe certain perfumes were worn specifically to enhance the cooling effect of clothing. Rose oil behind the ears, mint rubbed on the wrists, light scents that mingled with perspiration in a not unpleasant way. That might be poetic license. But then again, so is everything else that worked. You walk through a small plaza and notice something else. Everyone is dressed not just for the heat, but for harmony. Color palettes seem to mimic the desert itself. Dusty beige, sky blue, the faint green of olive leaves. Clothes aren't just protective, they're calming. And when the air feels like it's wrapped around you gently, you wrap yourself in return. Historians still debate whether this clothing style was born from necessity or from aesthetics. Did the Persians dress like this because they had to, or because they wanted to? You look around and suspect both are true. In Persian culture, form is function. If it doesn't bring joy or comfort, why wear it? As the call to prayer echoes gently through the streets, people begin gathering textiles to bring indoors for the night. The breeze has returned, slightly cooler now, and it dances through tunics and robes like a quiet blessing. You adjust your new robe, feel the air swirl around your knees, and smile. No fans. No thermoregulating tech. Just fabric, cut and draped by people who understood their world intimately. And for the first time in a long while, you realize it's not the weather that makes you uncomfortable. It's forgetting how to live with it. Night has arrived in full now, blanketing the city in a deep indigo hush. Lamps flicker behind carved screens, and distant laughter hums like a soft drumbeat through narrow alleyways. You follow your nose and your ears toward the sound of clinking dishes and rhythmic claps. Like a gathering, maybe a party, hidden within the folds of the warm evening. You round a corner and step into a shaded courtyard lit by hanging lanterns and swaying fireflies. The air is soft, incredibly soft. It moves in subtle currents like silk brushing against silk. You glance upward. Wind catchers loom above, standing guard like silent musicians conducting an invisible symphony of air. They're working overtime tonight, catching every lazy breeze and directing it down into the courtyard, right where people are gathered to feast, laugh, and laze. You've arrived at a Persian summer gathering, and somehow no one is sweating. Tables are low, covered in colorful cloth. Plump dates, roasted nuts, grilled lamb, bowls of chilled yogurt with cucumbers and mint. Everything looks and smells divine. Jugs of sharbat glisten with condensation, and chilled fruit slices sit like gemstones in carved wooden bowls. People recline on pillows and rugs, fans in hand, but more for elegance than survival. You take a seat, or rather you sink into one. A servant appears with a small towel dampened in rose water, and as you press it to your neck, the breeze hits. It's like someone just turned the temperature down 5 degrees with a sigh. One older gentleman, wrapped in fine white cotton, raises a glass and jokes that his home is cooled by the gods. Everyone chuckles, but you glance up at the windcatcher again, and part of you wonders if he's right. How else do you explain this oasis of calm in a desert night? Historians note that Persian homes were designed with hosting in mind. Courtyards were central, not just architecturally, but socially. They were open-air living rooms where neighbors dropped in, poetry was recited, and food was shared. And in summer, they became evening sanctuaries cooled by centuries of smart design. There's music now. Not loud, never loud, but rhythmic, circular, sleepy. A cedar twangs gently while a daft drum adds a pulse. Children chase each other in slow, giggling spirals. Elders sip tea and discuss, quietly and without urgency, whether the moon looks particularly smug tonight. One fringe theory suggests that summer gatherings like this were used to time seasonal transitions. As temperatures dropped and wind patterns changed, hosts would mark the nights with more elaborate meals and longer storytelling sessions, sensing the desert's moods as precisely as any weather app. You notice how every dish is part of the cooling process. The yogurt dishes? Probiotic and thermoregulating. The sour cherry stew? Tangy and refreshing. Even the desserts, like saffron rice pudding or frozen pomegranate seed sherbet, are made to calm the body, not just satisfy the palate. You sip a small cup of tea, more floral than bitter, and lean back to watch the stars. You've been in hot climates before. You know what summer parties usually feel like: sticky, crowded, noisy. But here, everything is gentle, intentional. The air moves, the food soothes. The breeze does its rounds like a polite waiter checking in. And here's the magic trick. The house isn't fighting the heat, it's partnering with it. Wind catchers hum overhead, the fountain burbles like a sleepy cat. Evaporation does its secret work on the stone tiles. Everything, the walls, the food, the fabrics, is conspiring to help you relax. Historians still argue over how much of this was design versus accident. Was the passive cooling a happy byproduct of thick walls and narrow streets? Or was it entirely deliberate, an environmental choreography learned over generations? The answer, again, is likely both. But as you sip your tea and let the breeze ruffle your sleeves, you stop caring. It works. Someone nudges a bowl of chilled melon slices toward you. You take one. It's the perfect bite. Sweet, wet, and just a little bit cold from having sat near a ceramic jug of spring water all evening. You let it melt slowly on your tongue, your eyes drifting up again toward the lazy stars. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere else, someone sings. Soft and low, a tune with no real beginning or end. Just the kind of music that seems made for warm air and slow nights. And as you stretch out on the carpet, comfortably drowsy, you realize something wonderful. In this world, even the parties are air-conditioned. The party fades into memory like the last note of a lullaby. And now you're walking slowly through the quiet streets of the city, trailing your fingers along the cool stone walls. The night deepens. The windcatchers still breathe softly overhead, like sleeping giants. But in your mind, another sound starts to echo. Marching feet, foreign accents, the clank of metal. You've wandered into a different moment in Persian history, one with visitors, uninvited ones. The invading Greeks have arrived, and they are confused. Very confused. Imagine being a soldier in Alexander the Great's army, arriving in Persia after weeks of desert marching. You're hot, you're tired, you probably smell like goat jerky left out in the sun, and then you enter Persepolis. The city gleams, its streets are shaded. People are not gasping for air, they're reclining on cushions, sipping fruit water with not a bead of sweat in sight. It's like stumbling into a spa after living in a sandstorm. You step into their sandals for a moment. Figuratively, of course. Yours are already far more comfortable. But imagine walking into these homes with their strange wind-catching towers, ice stored in domes, scented air, and nighttime rooftop sleeping. You're not sure if you've conquered a city or wandered into a dream. Historical sources like the Anabasis or histories of ancient authors hint at the disorientation of foreign soldiers experiencing Persian wealth and refinement for the first time. But it wasn't just gold and palaces that stunned them, it was the comfort. The Persians had made a home out of the desert. A luxury home. And the Greeks, they were still figuring out how to shade a helmet properly. One popular and possibly embellished tale claims that Greek soldiers believed the badgears were religious towers or status symbols, until they stood under one and felt the chill. After that, reports say they wouldn't leave them alone. One soldier supposedly tried to sketch the internal structure, only to give up in frustration and take a nap beneath it instead. You sit at the edge of a half-crumbled wall, looking out at the remains of an old royal compound. The columns still stand, the carvings still whisper. But the real treasure, the real miracle, was always the invisible kind. The wind guided through walls. The shadow cast just right. The breeze that turned stone into sanctuary. Historians continue to debate how much Persian design influenced the post-Alexandrian world. Some argue that wind catchers inspired later Mediterranean cooling techniques. Others suggest that, like much of Persian culture, it was admired, then quietly set aside in favor of marble, columns, and the thrill of conquest. But even if the blueprints didn't travel far, the memory did. Greek accounts speak with reluctant awe of how the Persians managed their environment, how their homes seemed to breathe, how their people didn't suffer summer, they danced with it. One fringe account from a Roman historian centuries later described Persian gardens as cooler than caves and scented by stars. Poetic nonsense? Probably. But you can't deny it fits. You pass by an old fountain now dry with age, but you can still see the channels, narrow grooves in stone where water once danced. A soldier's boot print, perhaps, long since worn away, once stood there, ankle deep in confusion and envy. Imagine the irony. You come to conquer an empire, and instead you get a lesson in indoor climate control. You climb a small hill, one of the many that surround the old cities, and sit at its summit. Below you, the wind catchers tilt toward the night sky, the domes of yakshols curve like sleeping beasts, and the faintest smell of myrtle floats up from the earth. The Greeks didn't take those with them. They took treasures, stories, and scrolls, but they left behind the cool air, the breezes that knew which rooms to enter, the silence of stone that remembered how to be kind. And you lie back and realize that some battles aren't fought with swords. They're fought with shadows, water, fabric, and time. And the Persians, they won the weather. The wind shifts again, and this time it carries something more elusive than scent. Questions. The kind that hover just beneath certainty, never quite settling. You feel them swirl around you as you return to the stillness of the city. Questions of memory, measurement, and myth. Because tonight we lean in close and listen to the scholars, those quiet, ink-stained voices who continue to ask, how effective were these Persian cooling systems really? You step into a small library nestled between two older homes. It smells like dust, old paper, and rosewater ink. Inside, candlelight flickers on hand-copied scrolls, maps of ancient qanats, diagrams of wind catchers drawn from memory or guesswork. A young scholar sits cross-legged by a window, his brow furrowed, his quill tapping silently. He's trying to calculate how many degrees cooler a courtyard actually stayed at noon, compared to the street just beyond. That's the crux of it. Was it truly air conditioning, or just a very elegant form of coping? Mainstream historians agree that ancient Persian cooling systems, especially in cities like Yazd, Kashan, and Isfahan, provided some measurable relief. Controlled studies of preserved homes show internal temperatures as much as 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the outside air. Not bad for a system with no moving parts. But others are more cautious. They point out that while the cooling was noticeable, it may have worked best only under specific conditions: low humidity, consistent wind, or homes with access to qanats. Once you factored in population density or building height, the effect became less dramatic. Then there's the issue of cultural bias. Western archaeologists in the 19th and 20th centuries often overlooked these techniques entirely, preferring to focus on palaces, gold, and wars. Only recently have Persian architectural methods been re-evaluated as sophisticated climate technologies rather than just charming traditions. You leaf through a scholar's notebook. He's written in slightly crooked Persian script, "The wind does not fight the wall." The wall opens to the wind. A quote? A thought? You don't know, but it lingers. Fringe theories suggest these systems were more symbolic than functional, that the wind catchers were spiritual, not practical. Some even argue that certain designs were exaggerated by poets and travelers looking to impress European readers with tales of magic architecture and ice in the desert. Maybe, but then you remember how cool it felt beneath those domes. You weren't dreaming that. Another corner of the debate concerns lost knowledge. Did the ancient engineers know more than we do now? Were there techniques, particular mixes of mortar, precise geometric alignments, that have since been forgotten? One researcher swears that the angle of some wind catchers aligns with seasonal solstices. Another insists that certain gardens were designed to funnel coolness from one quadrant to another, like a passive thermal circuit. You glance up at a wall-mounted diagram of a yakshal. It's cross-sectioned, revealing the inner pit, the insulation layers, the clever shade placement. It's more spaceship than storage room, and someone built that without electricity, CAD software, or thermal modeling. You step outside and find yourself in yet another debate, one between modern architects. They've come here, some from Paris, others from Tokyo, a few from Dubai, looking for green inspiration, ancient solutions to modern problems. Can the Bajir be reborn as a skyscraper feature? Can rooftop sleeping make a comeback in cities drowning in heat islands? Can the humble Connaught outshine desalination plants in sustainability? Some say yes, some shrug. Some are already sketching blueprints. And amidst all this speculation and scholarly side-eye, you smile. Because somewhere between data tables and digital simulations, everyone agrees on one thing. It worked well enough for people to build their entire lives around it. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it didn't drop the temperature by 20 degrees or turn summer into spring. But it was quiet. It was beautiful. It was sufficient. And it didn't require 1 ounce of electricity, coal, or guilt. You leave the library as the candles flicker lower. Outside, the wind is still drifting through the alleys, still threading its way through walls, courtyards, and domes, still doing its silent job. And you can't help but wonder, will anyone say that about the way we cool our homes today? You walk slowly now, feet bare on the cool stone of an ancient alley, the city a quiet patchwork of whispers and wind. The rooftops are still. The domes glint faintly beneath the moonlight. You've spent what feels like a lifetime wandering through Persian brilliance. Walls that breathe, towers that sigh, water that listens. But there's one final turn to make, because even the most graceful systems fade over time. And so tonight we follow the rediscovery. The moment modern minds began looking backward, tracing blueprints etched in dust and memory. It starts not with a grand revelation, but with a problem. The 21st century is hot. Not, oh, it's summer hot, but struggling to sleep, melting in the shade, blackout-inducing hot. Cities choke in heat islands. Air conditioners whine like overworked animals, and carbon footprints balloon with every chilled breath. And somewhere amid the hum of compressors and the buzz of climate anxiety, a few architects, engineers, and dreamers began to ask, what did we forget? The answers pointed here, to the deserts of Iran, to the city of Yazd with its skyline of wind catchers, to Connaught still trickling underground, to yakshals that had never known a single watt of electricity. And slowly, the idea took shape. We can learn from this. You're standing now in a modern building, sleek, minimalist, beautiful. But here's the twist, it's quiet. No vents, no mechanical cooling. Just a wide courtyard, a Bajir-inspired ventilation shaft, and floors that stay miraculously cool, even as the sun blazes outside. These are passive cooling revival projects, and they're real. In Dubai, a university uses modern wind catchers modeled after Persian ones. In California, engineers experiment with yakshal-shaped cooling tanks for off-grid refrigeration. In India, rooftop sleeping is returning in high-density housing. The past is whispering again, and some have remembered how to listen. One fringe startup is even developing AI-guided smart homes that mimic ancient airflow, mapping the wind's habits and learning when to open or close passive vents for maximum cooling. Basically, the Bajir gets a software update. You hear architects debate how modern materials can recreate mud bricks' thermal mass. Some say rammed earth is the answer. Others lean into bioconcrete. Everyone agrees. Concrete boxes and windowless towers are not working. Maybe it's time to trade steel for silence. You pass a classroom where students are sketching cross-sections of Connaughts. One asks if gray water can be rerouted underground to mimic ancient systems. Another wonders aloud whether a solar-powered Connaught pump could restore desert farms. A teacher points to a map of ancient Persia and says softly, "This was once a cooling empire." Historians note a renewed respect in academia for Persian environmental design. Once dismissed as decorative, It's now being studied under the lens of climate resilience. Not quaint, not exotic, just smarter than we gave it credit for. And there's poetry in the revival. In a world obsessed with speed, the Persian way was slow, thoughtful. You don't install a wind catcher, you build around it. You shape the home to the sun, you listen to the breeze, you let the air arrive when it's ready, you leave the modern building and walk back into the older part of the city. Nothing's changed, and yet everything has. You look up and for the first time you notice how every wind catcher tilts at a slightly different angle. They don't fight the wind, they court it. And that's the lesson. Coolness doesn't always come from force. Sometimes it comes from stillness, from shadow, from a roof beneath the stars and a wall that knows when to let go of heat. You return to your rooftop bed, your cushion already warmed to the perfect softness. The night is gentle. The air is calm. Somewhere a fountain continues its endless conversation with the breeze. You let your eyes close. And as your breath slows, the ancient city wraps around you. Not with noise or struggle, but with grace. Because the coolest places are not the loudest. They're the ones that remember how to listen. Let the rooftops fade now. Let the stars soften above that domed skyline. The wind, still moving through those old clay corridors, continues its slow, deliberate drift. No urgency, no effort, just presence. You are lying still, the warm night around you like a soft wrap. A breeze lifts and settles again, brushing against your skin with that familiar hush of desert cool. The stone beneath you holds no heat, only memory, of day fading into night, of people who built with their hands and listened with their hearts. You don't need to move. You don't need to fix anything. The architecture of comfort has already been laid around you, brick by thoughtful brick. Somewhere an owl calls. Somewhere the last rooftop lamp flickers out. And above it all, the wind catchers keep their gentle vigil, turning sky into breath, heat into silence. Let that quiet settle deeper now. Deeper still, you are part of the story. A story told by air and water and time. You are cool, you are calm, and you are safe. Sleep well.